So this morning, as we continue to unpack the first couple chapters of Job, we're going to seek to answer this question. Who is this guy? Who is this Satan that we see in chapter 1 and chapter 2 who comes to God and asks to pick on one of God's favorite people, Job? And we're going to find, first of all, that this Satan is God's enemy. So let's look at Job chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. Kind of pick up the story here. The author writes, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, 'From where have you come?' And Satan answered the Lord and said, 'From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it.'" And as Corey read this morning, we saw that same incident almost repeated verbatim in the second chapter, right before the second round of Job's suffering. And here we have a picture of a heavenly court, a heavenly throne room, and this group of beings called the sons of God come before God. And when you hear the term Son of God, you probably think of who? Jesus, right? The Son of God. And He's the only begotten Son of God. And so when you read of sons of God, you might ask, well, are these Jesus' brothers and they're all coming before their Father and presenting themselves to Him? And that's not the picture here, because we know that Jesus is one of a kind. He is unique. This group is a host of angelic spiritual beings. They're created beings and they're God's servants. And the picture here is of a heavenly court, like an ancient throne or court convening with God, the Creator, the incomparable ruler, seated on His throne of power. And these sons of God, these spiritual beings, are presenting themselves to Him to report on their activity wherever and whatever that might be. But then we find this other interesting character who comes along with them. And it says literally his name is, or his title is, the Satan. In Hebrew, it has the article the, so it's the Satan. And it's more of a title. It's not necessarily a name here. And it means the adversary, or the one who is against. That's what adversary means, one who is against. And that's exactly in the scriptures what we see that Satan is, one who's against, one who is anti-everything. And so as God's enemy, Jesus calls Satan a thief who comes only to steal and kill and destroy. And that's in John 10:10. I'm going to put some verses up here. I'm not going to quote all of them, but I'm going to just show you kind of where I'm getting a lot of the stuff that I'm saying this morning. So I'll put them up there. I encourage you to jot them down and go look at them later. In John 10, Jesus calls Satan a thief who comes to steal and to kill and to destroy. And this alludes to the fact that Satan desires to destroy everything to which God has a rightful claim. So not only is he anti-God, he's anti-everything. He's against everything, including us. He's a powerful anti-God spiritual being who sets himself up against God, against His person, against His words, against His intentions, against His ways, against His kingdom. And we don't have enough time to dig really deeply into everything the scriptures tell us about Satan or the devil this morning, but we're going to kind of do a 30,000 foot view of it. So the scriptures begin way back in the beginning with this presence in the Garden of Eden with our first parents, a mysterious serpent who shows up on the scene to tempt our first parents and ultimately lead humans in rebellion against God. And he is, in many ways, we see him throughout the story of the Bible as this anti-God power who's active behind the scenes anywhere that human sin runs rampant. And Scripture pictures Satan as a powerful being who once was a servant of God, who once was a part of this group, these sons of God, this heavenly court, but who, along with some other angels, rebelled against God. We see this in Jude 6 and 2 Peter 2. And then sought to place his throne above God's throne. He wanted to be in the place of God. And yet in turn, he was thrown down from heaven, cast out of heaven in judgment. So we see this Satan coming along with these sons of God into God's presence. And the picture here is that this wasn't a normal thing. It was not a normal occurrence. It wasn't like God was sitting there and Satan comes and says, "Oh, Satan, my buddy, my pal, this is great. We haven't seen you in a while. We're glad you're here." No, Satan was not invited to this party. He wasn't someone whom God normally had in his presence. And he comes and kind of butts himself in. And he begins when he addresses the Lord. He addresses him disrespectfully and cynically and defiantly. And we just even see in his attitude and demeanor here, one who opposes God in every way. And we can see that he came intending to create chaos and to undermine Job's faith ultimately. So Job is God's enemy. And we also see in the scriptures that Job is an accuser. So when God asks him where he's been or what he's doing, he said he's been wandering the earth. And implied in that, he's been trying to create chaos, to spread sin, to attack God's servants. And he's well aware of God's protection of Job, of his blessing on Job. And he even complains about it. So he kind of tips his hand in a sense that he's been trying to get at Job, but he hasn't been able to do so. So if you look there in chapter 1, verse 10, God asks him about Job. "Have you seen my servant, how he fears God, turns away from evil?" And then Satan says, have you not put a hedge around him, a wall of safety and protection, and his house and all that he has on every side? How would Satan know that unless he'd been looking for ways to get in? "Haven't you been protecting him? You've blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land." So since he hasn't been able to get at Job yet, he begins or attempts to entice God into removing this protection from Job. Look at verse 11. "But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face." And then again, the same thing. He comes back after he's taken all of Job's possessions, after he's killed all of Job's children. And he comes back into the throne room and he says to God, "Skin for skin, all that a man has, he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand, touch his bone and flesh, and he will curse you to your face." And you have to notice here that there's a twofold accusation. Satan's an accuser. He's bringing accusations. First of all, he accuses Job in front of God. He says, "Look, Job's faith is nothing. All Job is doing is giving lip service devotion to you in exchange for your blessings. As long as you bless him, as long as you give him health, he's going to worship you. He's going to have faith in you. He's going to trust you. But take all that stuff from him and his faith is worthless. It's gone." So he's bringing accusation against Job. But in this, he is also accusing God. And he's accusing God of not being worthy of Job's devotion. Not being worthy of a devotion of the man who has everything taken from him. God, you're not good enough. You're not wonderful enough. You're not beautiful enough. You are not big enough to take Job's worship if he has nothing for it. So Satan accuses Job and Satan accuses God as well of not being good enough for our worship. So the biblical picture of Satan is a picture of a vile, violent being who loves to accuse, who loves to condemn, and then by doing so to divide. He's seeking to divide Job from God, and he seeks to divide us from one another and from God as well. And he uses suffering to undermine and to destroy faith. He's cynical that anyone could truly love God and serve him with true intent. He is a liar, Revelation 12 tells us. A deceiver of the whole world, the accuser of our brothers, who in 2 Corinthians 11 we see disguises himself as an angel of light in order to deceive, who tempts and incites humans to do evil and rebel against God. And as Jesus put it in John 8, he is a murderer from the beginning. We also have to recognize in all this evil being has real power. And we see in Job chapter 1 and chapter 2 here that God gives Satan power to wreak havoc, especially here in Job's life. And it seems Biblically, it seems to be that Satan cannot cause anyone to sin unless they somehow have given him the ability to do so. So like in the New Testament, we see this example of Judas. Right before he betrayed God, the scriptures tell us that Satan entered Judas, and then he went and betrayed Jesus to the authorities. But something had to have happened in Judas for him to allow Satan to have that influence on him. So even though he can't cause us to sin, he can actively tempt us to sin in any way that he wants to. He distracts us from God. He challenges our faith. He creates chaos. He incites sin and rebellion all throughout the world. And as Peter put it in 1 Peter 5, that our adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Jesus even calls him the ruler of this world in the book of John several times. It's an image of power. In 2 Corinthians 2, we're called not to be ignorant of his designs and to consciously stand in battle against him in Ephesians 6. And if he didn't have power, we would need to stand in battle against him. He's got power, and we need the armor of God in order to fight against that power. But here's the even deeper truth. That even though Satan has real power, his power is limited. And I remember my youth pastor, Luke, used to tell us that Satan might be a lion prowling around, seeking someone to devour, but he is a caged lion. He is limited in his power. We should give him credit, but we shouldn't give him much credit. And even though he is a powerful spiritual being, he is no match for the sovereign Lord. Because Satan is under authority. And this story makes it clear that he requires God's permission prior to waging war on Job. So in the book of Job, 42 chapters long, the last we're going to see of Satan is in chapter 2, verse 7. That's it. He doesn't make an appearance in the rest of the book. He's not referred to. He's not talked about. And this clues us into the fact that he's not really a central figure in Job's story or in Job's suffering, and even in ours. In fact, he's pictured here almost as a means to a greater end. And what I mean by that is that God intends to do something with Job, just like he intends to do with you and with me. He will often use Satan as his foil so that he can bring around Job's ultimate good and ours as well. And it's easy for us sometimes to take too high of a view of Satan's power. Yes, we need to treat him seriously. Yes, we need to be aware of his designs. But it's also easy for us to slip into this kind of devil made me do it attitude. So every time we slip up, every time we sin, we can just blame it on that guy, right? And not take the responsibility we must take for our own sin. Or we can also say oftentimes, man, things are going wrong, so Satan sure is having a heyday. And almost get hopeless because of that. Satan's just having his way right now. And what we can do is become guilty of blaming things on him that God is actually doing in our lives. They may be difficult. They may hurt, they may be suffering, but God is doing something to test and refine and strengthen our faith. So in the end, Job shows us, the book of Job shows us, that Satan is infinitely weaker than God. He's real, he's powerful, but he's never to be our focus because God is bigger. And he is the one on whom we are to focus. We see in Job that he is the powerful creator and ruler. So at the beginning, when the sons of God come into the Lord's presence in Job 1 and then in Job 2, there's absolutely no question here of who's in charge. God is completely in charge. He is completely other than everyone else. He is the one who has created all things, including these sons of God, these heavenly messengers, and Satan himself. Satan is not seen in the Bible as an equal opposite version of God, like dualism. It's not this omnipotent, powerful good and this omnipotent, powerful evil, and they're going head to head in this cosmic battle, and we have no idea who's going to win. This battle that we see in the scriptures is between an infinitely good and powerful and omnipotent God and a created, fallen, twisted, limited adversary. Guys, the fight is not even fair. The playing field is not level, and only one of these will win. And we know who it is, don't we? So by the end of Job, when we get to chapter 42, we'll have a ringside seat when God, it's actually earlier than 42, but we have a ringside seat when God reveals himself to Job. When he comes and he flexes his muscles as the all-powerful, all-wise, all-good, sovereign God who is completely other, who is completely above all of his creation, including powerful spiritual beings like Satan. And because of who he is, God does deserve our worship. He does deserve our trust. He deserves our adoration and our submission more than anyone. God is powerful. He's creator and ruler. He is also the one who sovereignly is in control of all things. God's sovereignly in control of all things, including suffering. So what Satan intends for evil here, God can easily turn to good. And not only that, but I read Job and I think that God actually intended this test, and he intended it for Job's good. So we look at chapter 1, verse 8. This is repeated again in chapter 2, verse 3. The Lord says to Satan, "Hey, have you considered my servant Job? That there is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." Now, I don't know about you, but if I was standing there next to God and he said that to Satan about me, I'd be like, what are you doing? Are you painting a target on me so he'll just try to take me out? Come on, God, why did you have to point me out? You're just inviting trouble. No, see, God knew that Satan would attempt to destroy Job. And he also knew Job's character. He knew how Job would respond. He wasn't sitting up there the whole time chewing on his fingernails, hoping for the best in the situation. Now, it's controversial to say, but this story actually upholds this broad biblical truth that God is sovereign over all, even over the works of Satan. And yet, somehow, mysteriously, he is not the ultimate cause of sin or evil and rebellion in the world. And mysteriously, we will see it even here, God and Satan's activities often overlap. So look at chapter 1, verse 11. Satan says to God, "Stretch out your hand and touch all that he has." And here's what God replies, "Behold, all that he has is in your hand." So Satan's saying, God, you stretch out your hand and take all he has. God's saying, you stretch out your hand and do it. So whose hand is at work? Let's look at the next chapter, chapter 2, verse 3. God says to Satan, "Job holds fast his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without reason." Who's moving there? Who's working? Satan replies scornfully, "Stretch out your hand. Touch his bone and his flesh." And then God replies in verse 6, "Behold, he is in your hand, Satan, only spare his life." Who's at work here? Who's in charge? Whose hand is moving? Now, admittedly, Job doesn't get to see all that's going on, but he does attest to God's sovereign hand even through Satan's vengeful work. So all this happens in chapter 1. At the end of it, all these things have gone away and been taken away from him, and he falls on his face and worships as the Lord gave, the Lord has taken away. And again in verse 10 of chapter 2, "Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil or disaster or destruction from him as well?" Now, this is a great mystery, and theologians, philosophers have been arguing about the answer to this for thousands of years. So I'm not even going to try to answer it. I'm going to say it's mysterious, that God can be sovereign and divinely work through evil instruments and yet still not be blamed for evil. He truly, as Paul writes in Romans 8, works all things together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. And we can be assured of the fact that there are no accidents. That there are no accidents in our lives, that whatever evil Satan desires or employs against us can never come outside of the permission of a God who loves us, who is sovereign over all, and intends for our good in everything. Can be clear on that and hopeful in it. And so as we kind of wrap up, I want to give you a few things this morning to walk away with. And I want these to be things that would encourage us. We've been talking about Satan of all people, but hopefully the focus has come around from him to the one on whom our eyes should really be. So I want to encourage us towards a renewed vigilance, a strengthened faith, and an unshakable hope. And the first thing I want to say is that we must resist Satan. That needs to be part of what we do as followers of Christ, is to resist him. Satan is our enemy scripturally, but he is a defeated enemy. He came to steal and kill and destroy, and Jesus says Jesus came to give us life to the full. So at the cross, Jesus resisted Satan and conquered the one who has the power of death. By coming back to life, conquering death, he's given us the power and also the responsibility to resist Satan. So Satan is our enemy, but he is a disarmed enemy. He is one who has no true power over us, though we must resist him. So Ephesians 4:27, Paul writes, "Give no opportunity to the devil." In Ephesians 6:11, he says, "Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil." We have an enemy, and we've been equipped to fight him with the armor of God. And then in James 4:7, "Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will" what? What will he do? He will flee from you. Resist the devil, and he will flee. We must resist him as our King has commanded us to, because he has won as the victor. Secondly, we must guard from satanic thinking. So we must be aware how he thinks. We must not be, as Paul writes, ignorant of his designs. And Paul writes that we get outwitted by Satan when we do things like hold on to our anger, when we refuse to forgive others, when we succumb to pride, when we give in to sensuality, when we believe false doctrines. These are the ways that we give Satan footholds into our lives. A satanic mind is a mind that is prideful, that is cynical, that is divisive, that is accusatory. It takes its mind off of God and becomes focused on the self at the expense of everyone else. So if I have a satanic mind, all of a sudden, instead of having my eyes where they should be, they're on myself. And when my eyes are on myself, everyone is an enemy because everyone is a threat to me. Everyone could take away my autonomy. They could take away my power. They could take away my desires. They could take away my kingdom. Everyone is a threat, and so everyone is an adversary, an enemy. So a satanic mind is adversarial and oppositional. It feeds on divisiveness. It identifies others who look different or believe different or act differently than we do, and then it attacks them. It sets itself up on one side of 3rd Street or the other side of 3rd Street. And it says, those people over there are whatever. The enemy. Camps out on a side, groups other people together as enemies, demonizes them, condemns them. And if you look at our culture, our country, even our city, you see way too much of this division. And I would say Satan's having a heyday. But more sadly is when this happens in the church. Brothers and sisters, we can accuse and be divisive with our brothers and sisters when we talk about them behind their back, when we refuse to forgive them, gossip about them, Take care not to be an accuser of believers, because they already have an accuser. You and I already have an accuser. He doesn't need any help. So let's not help him. Let's do what Christ did and take on, instead of the mind of Satan, the mind of Christ, the mind that he has given us if we are his. Because his is a mind that, instead of accusing our enemies, does what? What does Jesus command us to do for our enemies? To love them, to pray for them, and to lay down our lives for them. It's a completely different view of people than Satan has. And finally, I want to end with this as a reminder and as something to go out of here with, that Jesus prays for us, so strengthen each other. I love this story in Luke chapter, it's just a short little 2-verse conversation in Luke 22 between Jesus and Simon Peter on the night that Jesus was arrested. And Jesus looks at Peter, whose original name is Simon, and you can almost just see tears in his eyes. And he says, Simon, Simon, Satan demanded to have you. And the word you there is actually plural. And so Jesus is referring to all the disciples there. He's demanded to have you, all the disciples, that he may sift you, all the disciples, like wheat. And this sifting like wheat could be translated as something like to tear you apart. He wants to separate you from each other. He wants to separate you from me. He wants to take you apart, limb from limb, if he can. And just like in Job, it's this picture of Satan coming to God and demanding access to these disciples. Then Jesus says this, but I have prayed for you. And here the you is singular. He's speaking to Peter specifically. But I have prayed for you, Peter, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. And you just get this picture of Jesus before his Father, on his face, pleading for mercy on his beloved Peter. And this is the same Christ, the same intercessor, the same advocate, the same Savior that we are told now stands at the right hand of the throne of God and lives to make intercession for you and for me. Satan is ultimately successful at sifting Peter. Peter denies him 3 times, and yet Jesus is confident that Peter will turn back. He doesn't say, if you turn back, if you are restored. He says, when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. So just as Satan acts as an adversary, Jesus acts as our intermediary. Satan is against us. Jesus is for us. Yes, Jesus is for us. Satan attacks us. Jesus prays for us. And I can't think of any better faith-strengthening, hope-filled reality than this, that our Savior intercedes for our faith in the midst of the battle, in the midst of the attack, in the midst of whatever suffering you might go through. Your Savior is praying for and interceding for you, and then calling you, when you've been restored, to turn and strengthen one another. And this, brothers and sisters, this is how we defeat our enemy. Let's pray. Father, we enter into prayer right now, realizing that it's through the blood, the work, the resurrection of Jesus that we even are able to enter into your throne room boldly and make our requests known to you. So we appeal to our intercessor, our intermediary, our Savior, Jesus Christ, your Son. We appeal to you to turn your ear to us and hear our prayers, God. Would you give us courage? Would you give us boldness? Would you give us strength? Would you give us the mind of Christ? Would you have us to put on the whole armor of God, to pick up our sword, the Word of God, and be people who are about your business in this world, which is a battle, which is warfare all the time, but know that you are the victor, that you will reign, that you will come again, and you will set all things right, and Satan cannot blow a candle to you. So, Lord, we pray that you would snuff out all of his works, even here today, God, his distractions, his chaos, his accusations. Would you silence him? God, would you give us a view of yourself as creator, as sustainer, as revealer, as the strong and mighty, all-powerful, self-existent, eternal one. God, you are great. Turn our eyes to you. And may we be people who, instead of accusing, love. Instead of hurling grenades at others, to forgive, to pray for, to lay down our lives for our enemies, just as you did for us. Pray all these things in your name and for your glory. Amen.